All right, and we are live. So, hey, welcome everybody. I have a very special guest joining us today, one of the members in the Fit Body program, Steve Kenul, who transformed his body while maintaining a hectic work-life balance and traveling. So, Steve, I want to thank you here for joining us, my man. I thank you for taking out some time out of your hectic life, and welcome to the Fit Body program. Chill.
Thanks, Urslan. Really appreciate it. Steve Kenul, Kenul, either which way you want to go ahead and pronounce it, doesn't necessarily matter. But I'm a 47-year-old finance professional that really just has a very, very hectic work-life balance. I'm up super early every single day, typically 4 a.m. In my office pre 6 a.m. And as far as, the time that I leave my office, it all depends on, what the day brings and, whether I'm traveling or whether I'm entertaining clients as well. So, on the earlier side, I'll make it home at 6:30. On the later side, I'm not home until 11:30, 12 a.m. So as far as, the days are concerned, it's really blurred and it becomes difficult sometimes to go ahead and manage. Myself personally, I'd worked out for the better portion, I would say, of 30 years. Of those 30 years, I would say 25 years, very seriously. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. When you're
Let's hear it.
younger, you think you're, impervious to injury, and obviously, your goals are a bit different regarding, what you want your body to look like and, how you want to feel. So obviously when I was in my younger age, I was more concentrated on, what I would say, the meathead look. And while, the meathead look, it does, look good for a while, what I did find was it was unsustainable. And I was very, very strict as far as my diet. At one point, I would say early to mid 2000s, I was ingesting roughly 400 grams of protein a day, maybe a bit more than that. When I got married in 2004, I was 222 pounds. I was 222 pounds with a size 49 chest, and I was benching 405. And I went through every single workout routine and regimen possible to go ahead and try to go ahead and structure my body naturally. I'm a firm believer as far as life is concerned. There's no shortcuts in life, and you need to work for everything. So as far as supplements, took branch chain amino acids, creatine, but outside of that, it was just eating as much as I possibly could and trying to ingest as much protein as I possibly could as well. So here I was, at work, while people were enjoying, pizza on Fridays, I was whipping out 3 cans of tuna fish, right, with hot sauce, and eating basically 3 cans of tuna with with hot sauce. And that was my lunch. And it really just comes down to, discipline. I've always been able to go ahead and have discipline in my life, whether it be school, whether it be work, whether it be work-life balance. Once I kind of set a goal, I always strive to go ahead and actually maintain that goal and stay on that path.
I love that, man. That's amazing. And thank you for sharing. So, Steve, with that said, earlier when we were talking before we went on live, you referred to yourself as a workoutaholic, which I love, by the way. So, what sparked your curiosity around having a coach in your corner when you were already so dialed in with everything that you were doing?
So, when we first spoke, really my motivation for this was I plateaued, I hit a rut. I was able to go ahead and self-help myself for close to 30 years, right? Besides reading books, besides reading blog posts, like I was able to go ahead and achieve whatever goals I wanted. Um, Fast forward to this year, the year that I turned 47, something changed. Not sure if it was my metabolism. I'm not sure if it was my metabolism changing because I had done intermittent fasting for pretty significant period of time. I really do think during that time I also was in, caloric deficits. I wasn't getting necessary macros that I needed. And while I was ranging between 190, 195 pounds at that point, lowest during that timeline, probably in the mid 180s, I always felt as if I was bloated. I always ate healthy, and I was in the gym 5 to 6 days a week. And for some reason, I was not seeing any gains, and I was not seeing any benefits of the workout. Truthfully, the only benefit of the workout for me was it was stress reliever. So, gym is something that I've always needed in my life because it's one of my outlets where I can, relieve stress. I'm pretty, private when it comes to things. I don't necessarily, my wife, speaks to me about it all of the time as well. And she asked me to open up about things that are bothering me, personal life, work life, and I just don't like to bring stuff home. And the way that I've kind of historically always dealt with it, go to the gym, get a great workout, no matter what time it is, and that's it, right? Tonight, I'm going to probably head out to the gym about 8:30, after I have my meal and get ready to go ahead and get the next licks in.
I love that, man. That's great discipline. It's I think it's a testament to the results that not only you've gotten, but then the results even that you and I were able to achieve together, working together with the discipline through the program. And what do you feel like was the thing in the program that contributed the most to the goal that you did achieve, where you've cut down now 10 pounds and you've had this transformation in your body?
So I think net now I'm probably down closer to 15.
Yep.
I tell you, it's number one, it's been diet, right? The diet and the structure around the diet and being cognizant of the macro intake that I have and the meal preparation. Like I said, I always ate healthy, but taking it to a next level, pulling out that scale, dialing in exactly what you're eating. I'm a creature of habit. And I know that some people don't like leftovers, and for me, I don't mind eating anything as long as it tastes good and it's healthy. And that's it. So, I think the primary catalyst, for me was the discipline around starting to meal prep. And I hated it at first. And I hate nothing more than coming home from the gym at 10 o'clock at night and going ahead and whipping up an omelet for my next morning. But it's impossible for me to do in the morning. So guess what? It gets done at 10 o'clock and I let it cool down before I go ahead and wrap it in my foil, put it in my Ziploc bag and put it in the fridge. And I get to wind down for an hour before I go to bed. So it really has been the discipline around the diet that I think has really propelled me to the, I would say next level. But I think in combination with, the workouts and, the routines that both you and Dylan have kind of cycled me off through over the course of my tenure with the program, I thought that they have assisted. The one, critique that I would have, me being someone that's a bit more experienced, it's not new to working out, probably starting off with that, 3-day split. I think that I probably could have upped my game just a bit, maybe even skipped the dumbbells and went straight to barbells, because the DBs were, way too easy for, what I was accustomed to. And while I was getting a burn, just because it's such an intense workout and regimen that you're completing any place between 50 minutes and an hour, I could have probably graduated to that next step just to go ahead and start.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that as well. If I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure you did within like 2 to 3 weeks.
I think it was just under 3 weeks. I was doing 7 sets of every single exercise that was on there, and I was just like, all right, getting a great sweat out of this, but don't see myself building much muscle.
Right. Yeah, totally, man. And, I want to talk about that. You mentioned something really critical there about planning in advance around making sure you had your breakfast made the night before, because it's not possible for you to get it done. Could you talk a little bit about how you were able to navigate while traveling, while having such a hectic work-life balance. Talk a little bit more about that, because like you said, there are days where you could be home at 11:30, 12 a.m. and you're up at 4, right?
Yeah. So truthfully, reading all of the information that you've kind of provided regarding, the FIT program, as well as the menus that you've provided, as well as the access that you've given me to both yourself as well as Dylan while I'm traveling and saying, hey, I'm going to be on the road for, 3 days. What can I go ahead and substitute? There's no way that I'm going to be able to get a, 6 egg omelet, right? At any place that I'm going. So, my go-to, when I'm traveling really for breakfast has been, steak and eggs, 2 eggs scrambled, with a, 6-ounce piece of sirloin steak. So, tons of protein in there, right? Fats as well, all right? But it's a good start to the day, and obviously supplementing with protein shakes. In addition to the protein shakes, if I was consistently on the go and I needed a bit of a boost, right? Knowing that I wasn't necessarily going to go ahead and meet my intake for the day, I purchased a ton of frog fuel, not only during my vacation travels, but also for my, business travel. And I never knew about, frog fuel. And I kind of thank my boss for introducing me to it. And it's great, 60, I think it's 60 calories, 15 or 21 grams of protein, whatever it is. And it's just like having a Jello shot, basically. Your body absorbs it relatively quickly. It's within 15 minutes time, and that's it. And I would typically like double up just to go ahead and get a protein boost when I needed. If I needed to skip a lunch, and make it towards a snack before going out to meals with clients.
I love that, man. That's awesome. Yeah, just that preparation and that planning, the discipline, really, I think, is the theme of.
It is, and I think once you learn, like I think the app is great. So the app is kind of been my navigator, and I know when I can plug in things and I can play with that. And my goal has always been to have the 5 meals a day, because that's what I've been accustomed to throughout the program. But in reality, there were sometimes I could only get 4 or 3 days. So it's eating more of something that I need, right, and less of something else throughout the course of the day, just to go ahead and balance that out and keep me on track.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it helps having that flexibility where you can make it work. Like you were saying before we got on, if you know that you're going to miss workouts, you're scheduling them in a way where you might do 7 in a row, but you're getting them in.
Yeah, and that's truthfully, and for the group here, Ursula and I were talking, in advance of, opening up the live call, and he just had mentioned, how some of the members kind of been motivated by the challenge that we've been in. I've always been a fierce competitor. I'm not the best at everything, but I really do try to be the best at everything. And as far as how I've kind of gotten so many points so quickly, truthfully, it's just been moving my schedule around. So when there were evenings that I knew that I was going to be out, or if I was going to be traveling on business, I would try to go ahead and stack my workouts, even attempting to, which I ended up not doing multi workouts in a single day, just because I'm lifting heavier now. And once you get with that heavier weights, obviously your body needs time to recuperate, regenerate, and also you don't necessarily want to risk injury. But I stack workouts, so I moved workouts to rest days. When I was traveling, if I was able to wake up super early, which I'm on my normal New York time schedule, I try to get a quick workout in before I caught a flight. So that was kind of like my primary driver of amassing points so quickly. And like I'm a creature of habit. There's I typically walk from my office, even though I could catch the bus on the corner of my office in the city. I walk a mile and a half to catch the bus every day. And why is that? Right? Because I know that I have a certain step count that I needed to go ahead and hit. And it's incredibly difficult to go ahead and hit that without actually getting out. I'm physically tied to my desk when I'm in the office until the time I leave, unless I'm in meetings or seeing clients. So I get the steps in when I can, and when I can walk, I will. So while it may seem as an inconvenience, like this evening, raining outside, guess what? Got to suck it up, right? Things in
Love
life
it.
are not easy, and if you want something, you need to really work for it. And this is, something that I've wanted, and it's really, you know, it's changed. It's changed my vision and perception of what working out is and what it should be and what it shouldn't be. And when we had first spoken, my motivation outside of figuring out why I was having this bloat and living and leading such a healthy lifestyle, was I wanted to prepare myself for my next 40 years of life. And I wanted to ensure that, I kept a physique that was close to where I am and where I'm accustomed to. And, I mentioned earlier, I was 222 with almost a 49 chest at that point, right? It's difficult to buy suits, right? It's difficult to clothe yourself, right? And it's just difficult to go ahead and maintain that lifestyle. If you're a bodybuilder, right, I think it's a different story because that is your means of making money. But for me, while it was great that I was able to go ahead and transform my body and get to that point, there was a point where I figured I need to wean myself off and I need to go ahead and move myself in a direction where I'm going to be comfortable with what my physique actually looks like, muscular, right? But not overly quote unquote, meathead-ish.
Yeah.
And I was able to go ahead and transform that on my own. But that transformation, it took some time to get there. I hate to run. It took quite a bit of running to go ahead and get there. I don't have enough time in the day to do everything that I need to do. So me not only working out for an hour and then running on a treadmill for a half an hour, 45 minutes or an hour, it's just far too much of a distraction for me, far too much time taken away from my family. I think one of the reasons why I love, the fit program here is my workouts are never longer than hour and 15 minutes, an hour and 20. And if they're going over an hour and 20, it's because instead of doing 15 reps, right, of the high intensity sprinting at the end of the workout, I end up tacking on another 10 and I just time myself. So like that's the only difference.
I love that, man. Could you, I know we're coming up on the hour here, but I would love to hear, a lot of the guys we work with are dads. Obviously, you have a family. Could you talk a little bit about navigating the program while, having a family and as well, actually?
Yeah, no, sure. I think, in my situation, and I understand everyone's situation is a little bit different. My kids, from the time that they can walk, from the time that they can talk, have always seen me leave to go to the gym, whether it's at 7 p.m. at night, 8 p.m. at night, 9 p.m. at night, 10 p.m. at night, or sometimes even 11 p.m. at night. They've always seen me, go to the gym. And a common question they ask me is, Dad, is tonight one of your workout nights? Right? Because it's so ingrained in them. It's part of kind of what I do and it's part of my lifestyle. And, I'm hopeful, right, that it's something that rubs off on them because you're only given one body and the better you take care of it, the better it's going to go ahead and take care of you. And there's things that obviously are out of your control, but you can't control what you can control. You can control what you eat. Yeah, you can cheat. There's nothing wrong with having cheat meals. I have my cheat meals. Ursula, you, myself, and Dylan had spoken about cheat meals. Cheat all you want. When you need to feel like you need to cheat, but you need to go ahead and get your macros first. So whether you're doing a 1,600 calorie, day count, 1,800, 2,000, 2,300, whatever the program is actually maintaining for you for what your goals are. If you're going to cheat, you got to make sure you get those macros. And then from there, I'm not going to say necessarily go crazy, right? But, eat what you want at that point and treat yourself. And one of the things that, I'll speak about very candidly was one of the questions I asked, Ursula and Dylan early on within the program was, just about, drinking, being out there and entertaining. It's difficult not to, consume, alcohol. And typically the alcohol that I consume is clean, not anything with any mixers. I'm a big tequila guy. I enjoy drinking it. I enjoy collecting it. And Ursula had stated, he was just like, "Oh, you can have 3 drinks in a night." I was like, "Oh, that's not bad." I don't typically, with the exception of being out for work, if I don't have anything going on for work Monday through Thursday or Friday, I typically won't drink Monday through Friday. I'll have a drink on Saturday. I'll have a drink on Sunday. So I'm like, this is great. But then that ended with or 6 in a month. And I said, I will follow everything that you tell me to do as far as this program is concerned. The one thing that I will not follow, right, is this 6 drink a month limit. It's something that while I could do, I've done, you know, I've gone dry for 60 days at a time. Um, but when I want to have something, I want to treat myself. And if I'm considering that as, one of my cheats, that's one of my cheats. I've worked hard for it. I feel as if I can reward myself when needed.
I love that, man. That's so funny. Yeah, the 6 to 8 drinks per month. I always have guys say that, hey, now Ursula, that might be a little bit tough for sure. Yeah,
But
man.
you know what? I probably would have gotten to my goal, right, in half the time, right, had I went dry during the entire period. It just didn't work, at the time as far as work-life balance was concerned. So, like I said, doesn't happen very frequently. When it does, I do enjoy treating myself.
Yeah, I think it's a testament also to the sustainability aspect of the program where you can live your life while achieving, even at your level, like an advanced level, an amazing result. And as we're continuing to progress. And Steve, I do want to ask, like, what would you say was maybe the biggest reservation that you had to overcome in order to make the leap and join the program, especially because none of this was in person, everything was online. Maybe
Yeah,
you've never tried anything like this before.
no, yeah. Listen, I've grown up and working out and going to the gym. I've had a ton of friends that I've worked out with. I've had a tons of friends that I've made in the gym. I've had a ton of workout partners, right? And this was always something that I always was able to navigate and maintain on my own. So the reservation really was, right, why do I need to ask anybody for help? And I'm pretty humble and I don't have a problem asking for help when I need it. And this is something that I thought I excelled at, and I would be able to go ahead and maintain by myself until I just couldn't figure anything out. And I saw the results that you had with Lave, and Lave and I are childhood friends, spanning back to freshman year of high school, as well as Mac, right? And Mac was one of my teachers, from our alma mater, Severian High School. So like I saw the results that were made, right, in such a finite period of time. And I'm just like, my body composition is different, but I obviously need some sort of jump start, right? Because something is wrong. And like I said, I'm not sure if it was due to, the overextension of intermittent fasting and, the fad dieting that I would do, thinking that it was healthy, trying to go ahead and live a keto friendly, lifestyle, you name it. I tried it. I will tell you one thing about this diet. I love steak. I've never eaten less steak in my life while being on this diet. Steak right now for me, having that filet mignon, my family, my kids absolutely love filet mignon. We would have it at least, once a week. I'd cook it on the weekends. There would be leftovers. We would have it for leftovers as well. And wouldn't necessarily say we're having, unhealthy portions of it either. But, an overabundance of red meat isn't necessarily good for you. And just the concentration on, the white meat, the chicken breast. I used to eat a ton of chicken, but, I loved, I loved, chicken legs, right? And I love chicken thighs, and they're tasty. Guess why, right? Because they're loaded with fat as well. So I haven't had any of that. And it's really been, I love to cook. So I've played around with a number of different recipes. And I found something that, not only I don't necessarily get sick of, my family doesn't get sick of, and as far as, most of my dinners, either I'm doubling up on chicken for both lunch and dinner, or I'm doing salmon, and it's super, super easy. And it's really about just the structure and the discipline that we spoke about. Typically, my wife will go shopping, I'll go shopping. Whoever has the time to go ahead and run out and do the errands, for that week, we really do try to go ahead and divide and conquer, where we can. And I'll do the cooking, I'll do the meal prep, and I'll buy 2 packages of salmon right at Costco, and we'll have two packages of salmon. I'll cut them each up into 10 pieces, uh, 3 pieces in a bag. I marinate them, and I put them in the freezer. Right when I need them, just need literally over the evening to go ahead and thaw in the refrigerator, and that's it. 20 minutes inside the oven on 400, right? Comes out great. With the chicken as well. Chicken, you don't necessarily have to over engineer what you were doing. When I started the program, I was over engineering. I was chopping chicken up into cubes. And I was grilling it on the barbecue, almost trying to do like a stir fry on the barbecue, just with natural sauces. But the kids complained. They said the chicken, at times it could be dry, right? Because chicken, you have to be super careful with how you cook it. You want to make sure you cook it. So I changed my recipe, and I just do whole breasts now. And it's changed my life, because as far as the prep time is concerned, it's only about 10 minutes of prep time to do the whole breasts, right? I cook enough breasts for me to have for lunch for an entire week, almost 6 days, and probably 2.5 dinners if possible. And as far as the cook time is concerned, it's 30 minutes in the oven at 400 degrees, and it comes out super tender, super moist, and it retains its moisture throughout that time. So there's no over drying. The kids don't necessarily have a problem with eating the leftovers.
That's brilliant. That's a really good people. Anybody watching should be taking notes. That was really good meal prep tips right there. Very efficient too. Yeah, I love that. And Steve, what do you feel like was different about this program than anything that you've ever tried before in the past? Maybe the thing that really was I know you mentioned the diet was the thing that contributed, but I'd love to hear from you.
So, I'm going to always, lean back on the diet aspect of it, but I also do appreciate the fact that you and Dylan kept me guessing during the program as well. So as you saw me hitting the goals that I wanted to attain, you wanted to ensure that I wasn't going to necessarily plateau. So you were tailoring not only my diet, but my workout to what those perceived plateaus could have potentially been. So where I would potentially look like I was falling into a rut, and the weight loss was stagnant at times. I didn't necessarily feel as if I was getting the most out of my workouts. You switched up the workouts, and you also, put me on reverse dieting, or you actually lowered my caloric intake for the day, for not the day, but for the next period. And whether that period was 2 weeks, whether it was 4 weeks, whether it was 6 weeks, you did it until I restarted my metabolism and I started seeing the results that I needed to see.
I appreciate that very much. You sharing that. That's a really good perspective, and I think it's cool to hear that, even from like the outside. That's awesome. Awesome. And then Steve, what would you say to anybody that may be on the fence about joining the program, maybe, or just anything that you would say to anybody that may have a reservation, maybe who this program is for and not for?
Do it. Nike said it best. Just do it. I have a number of friends that had reached out to me. I have a number of friends that had joined post seeing some of my results. And this is something that I really didn't need to do, because I generally was in good shape, right? And a lot of people are out there and they joke about dad bods and everything. I never really considered myself to have a dad bod, because I was in good shape. Yeah, I had a bloated in the center of my stomach, but I wasn't ever overweight. So if you're watching this, if you've been following closely, if you've been following from afar, right? I don't necessarily think that you could put a price tag on the benefits that you will see, post this, because it really will go ahead and change your perception on eating, right? And also on working out. If you need something to motivate you, I really do think that the app keeps you super accountable, right? It's structured, right? At first, maybe a little bit annoying because you need to go ahead and log everything in there. But guess what, right? If you're meal prepping, right, the copy and paste function, right, is absolutely awesome, right? So if you're eating the same thing for 3 days basically at the same times, right? It's a click of a button and it copies that to the next day. So you learn the tricks as you're going through the program and utilizing the app. But listen, I use the app really as my compass, right? I look at it, I load my steps, I load my body weight, almost on a daily basis now. It was weekly at this point in my program, I've been doing it daily. And truthfully, my goal is, to be, the healthiest, Steve that I possibly can be, and the fittest Steve that I possibly can be. Do I want to be the Steve, or will I be able to go ahead and attain, a 405-pound bench press, with this physique? The answer is no, but that's not necessarily what I'm striving for. What I'm striving for is, me, feeling good, right? And also, just for personal benefit, thinking that I look good as well.
I love that. And actually, one thing I would like to ask is how has this transformation impacted maybe internally external transformation, if in any way?
I've always been, a pretty confident individual, but like I said, I did get into a rut because I had been working out for the first, I would say, close to 5 or 6 months, of this year, and I just wasn't seeing those results. And I always knew that I could pivot and get on that treadmill, but for the reasons that we spoke about, a bit earlier, just jumping on that treadmill for a half an hour, right, 45 minutes, right, 15 minutes on the treadmill isn't going to do anything for you. So what I really do think, this routine combination of the diet as well as the workouts being more high intensity and full body driven. Now I'm on a push pull routine, where I'm doing, 5-day workouts. And I absolutely love it. It keeps me guessing. I force myself, on a weekly basis to go ahead and, increase my weight. It's difficult at times, especially when you start lifting a bit heavier. And the reason why is I don't have anyone that I work out with anymore. When I was younger, I had my gym partner, my two gym partners, where it'd be great. My biggest frustration really is now in the gym, just seeing all the kids on their cell phones, right, and just occupying the equipment that I need to use at the time, right? Because everything is being timed, right? And if I need to make it from one machine to the next, then I need to go ahead and start loading up weights, right? And somebody's just, scrolling through Instagram on their phone. I'm just like, Instagram is not for the gym. Instagram is for home. It's for on the bus. It's for your personal time, right? You're supposed to be changing yourself, right? You're supposed to be bettering yourself within the gym. And I think people don't necessarily focus on that.
I love that, man. That's such a good mindset. 100%. I couldn't agree more. That's such a good mindset. Awesome, man. And just to kind of wrap up, what would kind of like final words of wisdom do you have maybe for everybody in the Fit Body program now, all the members watching, because you've been such a positive role model for everybody in our community. Maybe some words of wisdom, some encouraging nuggets or golden wisdom that you would like to share.
I'm not one that's typically at a loss for words, but you may have actually just stumped me over here. As far as wisdom and encouragement, um, I'll leave it with something simple. Set smart goals for yourself. Make sure it's specific, make sure it's measurable, make sure it's attainable, make sure it's realistic, and make sure it's timely. Right. So not only for this routine that you're working with Ursula on, or potentially working with Ursula on, but anything that you really do in life. if you want to say that, I'm going to go to the moon, right, and that's your goal, right, I'm going to say that's not a realistic goal, right? If you tell me that, you hired 10 engineers and you're in the process of building a rocket, and the rocket's been, tested and it's passed whatever FAA testing that's needed. You've went to flight school, right? And you've taken all of these steps. It sounds as if somebody had a plan and a process and a program in place, right? But whatever you do, just set short-term goals for what your aspirations are. And as you attain them, right, try to go ahead and stretch those goals out a bit, right? There's nothing wrong with having a stretch assignment, but when you try to have a stretch assignment for every assignment, you're going to set yourself up for failure. So short-term gains, right, will become long-term victories.
Wow, that was brilliant. Oh, wow. Thank you. That was probably the best answer I've ever heard to that question. I love that analogy. And wow. Wow. I'm taking notes here as well. That was great. Awesome, man. Well, Steve, I want to thank you so much for your energy, for the discipline, just the way you show up, your presence. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this there with us. And, I hope everybody found value from this, and I know they did, and I hope everybody found this inspiring. I'm confident everybody did, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching. And if you did find this valuable, if you did find this inspiring, feel free to share it with somebody that you think would also find some value from it. You can feel free to heart the video, like the video as well. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank you again, Steve. And we will catch you in our next video.
Be well.